俺の財宝か？欲しけりゃくれてやる。探せ！この世のすべてをそこに置いてきた。
Yo guys, and welcome to this new video. After a while I figured out that probably the best subject possible for a celebration for the 1000 subscribers of the channel can only be the Pirate King himself. And this is also because I think often Roger is overlooked in the sense that nobody tries to truly understand its meaning, what it represents in the plot, which is both central and, in my opinion, unique in the manga. But before starting, if you're not part of this crew and want to join me in this journey that, from my point of view, has only begun, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Alright, with that said, let's jump straight into it. So, Gol D Roger is actually the very first character we see in One Piece, and as such he opens the manga both literally and metaphorically, because he's the one who creates that atmosphere where the main characters grew in, and which is also what inspired Luffy to become the pirate and the person he is now. Indeed, the very protagonist of the series can be considered the true son of the spirit Roger transmitted to the world, and in particular through Shanks directly to Luffy himself with his death. And it's not a case that in Marineford, Mihawk, whose site, in my opinion, Oda wants to be exceptional for the way it sees through people and not for something related to just fighting skills, defines Mugiwara exactly with the words "son of the new age." And so the key to understand what Oda wants Roger to represent is understanding this very atmosphere that he created when he died. And so again we go back to his execution, which signs both the end of his life and the beginning of One Piece. And by the way, a very interesting thing about Roger is how this theme of the beginning and the end relates to him in multiple ways. Indeed, as I said a moment ago, his execution signs the beginning of One Piece, but the Marines wanted it to sign the end for the pirate age all over the world, and for this reason they called Loguetown the town of the beginning and the end, referring to the fact that Roger was born and died in that place. However, considering how the consequences of the execution all over the world were completely opposite to what the Marines expected, for everyone in the world, if Loguetown was indeed the town of the end because it's where Roger died, at the same time it's also the town of the beginning because it's where that very death caused the great age of piracy to begin. And so, even if the world government planned the execution to be the end of the beginning, it actually signed a new beginning after the end of Roger's legend. But the question now is this what Roger truly wanted? Is this what he planned to achieve with his last words? Well, to answer that, we again have to understand what this character is truly meant to represent. And I think that the most interesting and also significant starting point for this discussion is actually Roger's characteristic mustache. Indeed, for how surprising this may seem to you, the way Oda treated this specific element definitely defines what the author wanted the core of the character to be. And this is because, just like some other aspects of the beginning of One Piece, as for example the moment of Luffy's meeting with Nami and the position of the Arlong Park arc in the plot, which, if you don't know, Oda originally wanted to be the very first things to happen in the East Blue Saga. That, by the way, is why the first color spread of the series features Nami instead of Zoro together with Luffy and Shanks. Similarly, what is recognized today by all fans, the most characteristic element of Roger's appearance, was originally intended to be his nose hair. And actually, if you look carefully at Roger's first appearances in the manga, so for example in chapter 1 and in chapter 99, the mustache does seem to come out from his nose, suggesting that this specific aspect was changed only later in the plot, while instead the meaningfulness of the Pirate King evidently didn't change from what Oda wanted it to be when he first conceived the character. And this can be inferred by the fact once the author stated that at the moment of Buggy's flashback back in Orange Town, at that point he had already established that the ship where he and Shanks were being apprenticed on was Roger's one. But then the fact that Buggy compares Shanks' attitude to the one of the other pirates of the crew suggests that the captain which put together that crew saw piracy and life in general in the same way that Shanks years later transmitted to Luffy. Meaning that the atmosphere of the 900 chapters we have now built around the Pirate King is still the same that Oda originally wanted for the character even before he made a mustache out of his nose hair. And so the point here is that even if each time Gol D Roger appears he transmits greatness, even if his legend is what sustains One Piece and what created the One Piece world as it is now, despite all that, Oda wanted his appearance to be characterized by an incredibly ridiculous element. And this may sound an absurd contrast, but it actually contains one of the two aspects constituting the essence of Gol D Roger and of One Piece itself, since for what we said before, this character represents the core of the entire manga. Indeed, the idea that the extremely long nose hair makes him look unfitting a person presented as the man who acquired the greatest fame, power and richness in the world is exactly what Oda wanted to transmit, to underline that for how Roger was introduced as the man who conquered everything someone could ever dream, in truth he was just a very simple man who couldn't even cut his nose hair to a decent length and who didn't want to conquer anything. And in fact, the first and for now only time a person in One Piece told Roger's legend from the perspective of someone that actually lived it really in Sabaody, he didn't talk about the ways Roger built his own fame, he didn't talk about the extraordinary feats his captain achieved in battle, and he didn't talk about the enormous treasures they found on their way. He simply talked about a man that, despite his incredibly painful illness, decided to spend the last years of his life facing the most difficult route in the world, and eventually, after a journey where he exaggerated parties and battles in his own way, he became the first man in centuries to reach the final destination of the Grand Line, Raftel. And I think it's very significant that Rayleigh says it was at that point that people started to call Roger the Pirate King. Indeed, it's not that he was from the start. And these words again clearly try to underline the man behind the title. A man who, as Oda revealed in the special chapter for the Strong World movie, Chapter 0, roamed the seas only in search of his own freedom. And it's not a case that in that chapter where Rayleigh told about Roger's life, Luffy states the same exact thing, pointing out again the similarities between Mugiwara and the Pirate King, hinting for the upteenth time how he could be his most rightful heir. Since more than anyone else, he seems to be the person who completely understood and adopted the spirit Roger wanted to transmit to the new era through his own execution. And this passage of ideals contains the second component of Roger's characterization, constituting the core of One Piece, the inherited will. Indeed, if one of the central elements of this series is a way of interpreting life where people pursue their own dreams of freedom, the other one is the passage of these dreams from one generation to another. Roger is clearly the most emblematic character embodying this specific concept. First, because the most characteristic element of Luffy's outfit, the straw hat, was originally his own, but mainly, as we said a couple of times before, because of the way he was capable to transform his own death, meant to be the end of the beginning, into a new beginning after the end of his own life. And incredibly relevant in this sense is how it seems he actually planned his execution to go that way. And proofs of that, again, can be found in the chapter called Roger and Rayleigh, which I mentioned before, where the Dark King states that just like Roger enjoyed to make parties but also battles big during his journey, during the last part of his life he seemed to enjoy also planning his unavoidable death. And putting these words together with the fact he decided to surrender to the Marine even if he was dying anyway, the idea that he had actually set up a situation where it was possible for him to lit the flames of a new era with his last words suits very well not only with the fact that apparently both the name and the very existence of Roger's treasure were first mentioned at the time of his execution, but mainly with the fact that that mention in that situation clearly had as only aim exactly to mention both the name and the existence of Roger's treasure. In the anime this is ridiculously clear, since there is a mysterious person asking Roger a question that, more than a way to search for an information, clearly is a way to reveal information, because he asks, is your famous treasure, your incredible treasure, the One Piece in the Grand Line? And so, in this way, he started to create an atmosphere of legend around the treasure that probably was never mentioned before, that was then fed by Roger's last words. This suggests that the Pirate King and this person, probably someone very close to Roger or his crew, planned to have this kind of conversation beforehand. But even if we consider just the canonic part of Roger's execution, so the one we see in the manga, made only by Roger's last words, it's clear that they are an answer to some sort of question, and so it's difficult to imagine anything too different from what we see in the animated version. And all this makes all the more sense if we consider that Whitebeard's last words and Sengoku's reaction to them suggest the name One Piece, and so the treasure itself, is related to the secrets of the world, so the Void Century and the Ancient Kingdom. Secrets that Newgate apparently came to know when he asked Roger about D, as we can deduce from that brief flashback where we see them exchanging Sakatsuki, which, by the way, I think took place in Wano just after Roger's crew reached the raft and in occasion of Oden's return to the land of samurai, which was probably also the moment when Momonosuke met the Pirate King. But anyway, this connection between the treasure and the Void Century means that instead of being something Roger accumulated during his life as a pirate, the One Piece is most likely something Roger found in the very last island and that's decided to live there. The reason for that is, as I mentioned in the second video of the Void Century series, and as I will probably mention in some others, is that the world didn't meet yet the conditions for the One Piece itself to fulfill whatever purpose it has. However, they came to know that purpose itself, and this is probably why Roger decided to set up his execution, his last moments and his last words to lead the world towards that very purpose. But even if this was what Roger wanted to achieve, what he actually passed to the new era is much more, and it's in this true essence of his last message that lays his importance for the theme of the inherited will. Indeed, what Roger gave to people in that moment is something that doesn't care about the treasure, doesn't care about its name, what it is made of, and even if it actually exists. Which is also why acquires great significance the fact he didn't even bother to hint the place where the treasure actually is, and even more meaningful is that whether someone actually finds the treasure or not, those who set sail just to search for it received from Roger something much more valuable than anything the One Piece could ever be. An impossible goal. A dream consisting only in believing there is something legendary to be found out there, but which is enough to make legendary any journey pointed towards that might, independently from how far it actually goes, because in a world that will kill you sooner or later anyway, a life spent for your own greatest dream is a life worth to be lived, and more importantly, which doesn't care about death. And so what the inheritance of the Pirate King truly consists of is simply an excuse to make people follow their own will of freedom, which, as Roger said in those words remembered by Dragon in Loguetown, is the vehicle through which everything is passed to the next generation of dreamers, even through centuries. I hope that in the same way I was capable to pass to the few of you who actually arrived to this point of the video the true essence of Gol D Roger and how important it is not only for One Piece but even for your own life. With that said, thank you very much again for the 1000 subscribers. I created a Discord server, so if you want to join, I will put the link in the description below. And as always, don't forget to leave a like, make sure to subscribe, and see you next time. Gianè.